a major new film for BBC One.
I'm Joe. I look after a big house. The owner lives across the street. He won't live here because he says the house has got secrets.
Be careful.
I get visitors sometimes.
Ask if Charlotte and I can use one of the rooms upstairs.
One of the rooms upstairs?
What's the woman like?
She's really pretty.
For 3 hours a day, I'm the only one here. It's my house then.
It's a palace.
Written and directed by the award-winning Stephen Polyakov, starring Michael Gambon and Rupert Penry-Jones. Joe's Palace, Sunday at 9 on BBC One.
Hey guys, we're going to need a lot of help on this. Can we get toilets and oxygen? Anyone for a raspberry chocolate whopper?
This year for BBC Children in Need, do something different and make a difference. Go online or ring 0845 607 3333 now for your free fundraising pack.
This is BBC One in Yorkshire. Now the news with Hugh Edwards and Ian White.
A sharp rise in the number of foreign nationals now working in Britain. Another 300,000 are added to the official figures today. Ministers say that they are already taking action.
That's why the system needs such radical change over the next 12 months. It's always frustrating when new information like this emerges.
But the Conservatives are now calling for annual limits on immigration from outside the EU. Also tonight, a controversial state visit by the Saudi king, who accuses Britain of ignoring warnings about terror attacks.
We have sent information to Great Britain before the terrorist attacks in Britain, but unfortunately no action was taken.
For the first time, one of the paparazzi gives evidence at Diana's inquest. And a warning that home repossessions are set to rise sharply next year.
And on Look North tonight, exclusive, we're out with a special police team as football violence returns to Elland Road. And the man who made Meadowhall says he regrets it and criticises our consumer society.
Good evening. The number of foreign workers in Britain is 300,000 more than previously thought. Ministers revised the figures earlier this evening to show that foreign nationals now account for up to 8% of the workforce. Earlier today, the Conservative leader David Cameron had called for annual limits on immigration from outside the European Union. Our political editor Nick Robinson has more details.
Foreign workers have been coming to Britain faster, much faster than we've previously been told. Ministers used to say that there were 800,000 more than a decade ago. Tonight they dramatically revised that figure to 1.1 million. Far from apologising, the immigration minister says it proves the system needs an overhaul.
Well, that's why the system needs such radical change over the next 12 months. It's always frustrating when new information like this emerges, but it underlines the point why it was a mistake to remove exit controls and why we urgently need new systems in place to count people in and count people out of the country.
And this on the day when the Tory leader, who steered clear of talking about immigration, gave his first major speech on the I word, or what he calls a modern population strategy.
Immigration is too high. Family breakdown is too high. Unsustainable demographic change makes it harder to build the opportunity society I want to see.
Michael Howard, his predecessor, was accused of playing the race card when he campaigned for a limit, not just on immigration, but asylum too. David Cameron says he's learnt from that. It's immigration alone he wants to cut, but he won't say by how much.
Well, at the moment, the net figure, that's the difference between people coming and people going to live elsewhere, the net figure is about 200,000. So that's 2 million over 10 years. It's a large number. We think it should be substantially lower than that. I'm not naming the number today. It's about 200,000 net now. It was about 50,000 net when Labour came to power. Is that substantially lower? Is that the sort of... Well, that is substantially lower. Obviously, there's a numerical fact, and I think that the sorts of level of immigration we've had over the last 10 years, I think, has been too high. I think the sorts of numbers that you've talked about in the past is actually at a time when Britain found it easier to integrate new migrants. I think that sort of figure, but when we get closer to election, we may be able to say more, because we will have done more work on that conversation we need between business on one hand and public services on the other.
Both main parties are now promising limits on the number of people coming to Britain. A points-based immigration system will be introduced by ministers next year. Those with more skills will get more points, limiting the number of low-skilled workers who are accepted. The Tories want to go further, adding a national limit to the number of immigrants, but only for those from outside the EU.
The public is concerned about immigration, but what was very disappointing today was that we heard the same old sound bites that we heard 2 years ago. We're now taking the immigration system through its biggest shake-up in its history. A point system, a single border force with new powers, counting people in and out of the country, and of course compulsory ID cards for foreign nationals. We heard nothing about that kind of substance from David Cameron today.
It was the arrival of thousands of East European workers which helped change the politics of immigration. Tomorrow, ministers will extend temporary controls on those Bulgarians and Romanians who want to follow their Polish cousins who came to Britain in such vast numbers.
We can talk to Nick now at Westminster. Nick, is there any sign of regret at all from within government about the fact that they've had to revise these figures so dramatically?
Yes, indeed, there's an apology tonight in the letter that was released to MPs by Peter Hain, the Work and Pensions Secretary. He does apologise that the figures produced by his department were wrong. Figures that were an estimate of the number of foreign workers who've come here in the past 10 years. And what's striking, I think, tonight, Hugh, is that with both main parties competing to sound tough on this issue, they simply won't even give estimates of what their policies would mean. The government promises this range of different measures, but they simply won't say what that would mean to the level of immigration, how it would compare with now. David Cameron wants a national limit, but he won't say what it is, or even at what sort of level it should be. In that interview you saw with me, he did sound mightily tempted, though, by that figure of 50,000 a year net immigration. That would be a quarter of what it is now. And with the changes coming from the EU, Bulgarians and Romanians having to be let in eventually after these temporary controls run out legally within 7 years' time, that would represent a dramatic change from the position we're in now.
Nick, many thanks. Nick Robinson at Westminster. King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia has arrived in Britain on a state visit, the first by a reigning Saudi monarch for 20 years. The visit is already mired in controversy after he accused the British government of failing to act on Saudi intelligence, which might have averted the London bombings of 2005. The Home Office says it did not receive any specific warnings. The three-day visit is seen as highly significant as Saudi Arabia is the world's biggest oil producer. UK exports amount to over £4 billion a year, including arms deals, and of course it's seen as a key ally in the Middle East. Here's our World Affairs editor, John Simpson.
Nothing small time about this visit. It needed 5 jets to transport the entire Saudi delegation. King Abdullah knows his visit is controversial here, but both sides feel their relationship is so mutually valuable, there's got to be the full panoply of a major state visit. Still, there are minor tensions and disagreements. Speaking to me back in Jeddah, the King complained that Britain wasn't doing enough about terrorism.
I believe most countries are not taking this issue too seriously, including, unfortunately, Great Britain. We have sent information to Great Britain before the terrorist attacks in Britain, but unfortunately no action was taken, and it may have been able to maybe avert the tragedy.
Well, could it? The British side doesn't think so. The Saudi information was too vague to act on, apparently. But the Saudis are a lot more independent-minded than they used to be. The King felt so strongly about American actions in Iraq and the possibility that it might bomb Iran, he wouldn't even speak to me about these things. His foreign minister, Prince Saud, did the talking instead.
Force, it's like the perennial example of a bull in a china shop. You may destroy more than what you can gain.
Saudi Arabia never used to talk about America like that in the past. But it's the huge BAE weapons contract with Saudi Arabia and the accusations of bribery against a leading member of the Saudi royal family that have affected Britain's relations with the country. When I raised the question, Prince Saud chose his words carefully.
Where is the corruption here? Is it the briber or the bribee? I mean, if it is, the accusation is not an accusation on Saudi Arabia, to my mind. The accusation is an accusation of Britain.
But the main question over this visit comes over human rights. King Abdullah is, by Saudi standards, a reformer, but that is a distinctly relative term.
I don't think the British government should be offering the honour of the state visit to the head of a regime which has an appalling record of abuse of human rights and is deeply corrupt, and where Britain is already too intimately involved through corruption.
But for the British government, it's a matter of practical politics. The relationship with Saudi Arabia is so immensely valuable to both sides in terms of jobs and profits. The government is always going to make the king a welcome guest here. John Simpson, BBC News.
Mother of a British soldier killed in Iraq says she holds Tony Blair responsible. Fusilier Gordon Gentle was killed in a roadside bomb attack in Basra in June 2004. His family argue the Land Rover he was in was not properly protected. Today, at the inquest into his death, his commanding officer said a new device to detect bombs had been requested and was fitted to the Land Rovers just hours after the explosion in which Fusilier Gentle died. For the first time, a member of the paparazzi has given evidence at the inquest into the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. Stéphane Darmon was a driver for one of the paparazzi and one of the 7 arrested after the crash. The jury also heard from 2 French witnesses who described a car they saw driving erratically out of the tunnel that night in Paris 10 years ago. Nicholas Witchell was in court.
It was the car which got in the way and gave rise to a worldwide conspiracy theory. The white Fiat Uno, the car the Mercedes struck, but whose driver was never positively identified. It was the failure to find the Fiat driver which, more than anything, allowed the conspiracy theories to take root. But today, the only 2 witnesses who saw the driver told the inquest they believe this man may have been the person at the wheel of the Fiat. His name is Levan Than, a Parisian security guard. He's said to have resprayed his white Fiat Uno red at around the time of the crash. The witnesses also said they saw a large dog in the back of the car. Mr. Van Than, though, has consistently denied that he was the driver of the Fiat Uno. In choosing the photographs of him, the witnesses dismissed the man on the right in this picture. He's the late James Andanson, the man the conspiracy theorists believe caused the crash in his Fiat Uno on the orders of the British establishment. Whatever the truth of that, there's no doubt that these men were in the tunnel after the crash. They're the paparazzi arrested by French police. One of them, Stéphane Darmon, gave evidence from Paris. He wasn't a photographer, but a motorcyclist transporting the paparazzo Romuald Ra. Mr. Darmon told the inquest about the time they'd spent outside the Ritz Hotel waiting for Diana and Dodi to leave. He said the Mercedes driver Henri Paul came out and appeared to be taunting the photographers, at one point indicating that it was 1-0 to him. Then Mr. Darmon described the approach to the Alma underpass. He denied that his motorcycle was close to the Mercedes, though he did accept that he and Mr. Ra were the first to arrive at the scene of the crash. He'll face cross-examination tomorrow, when it's hoped some of the photographers will also give evidence. So, once again, an interesting day's evidence, and particularly in relation to the white Fiat Uno, with an identification, albeit a tentative one, of the driver from the only witnesses who saw him. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News, at the High Court.
Home repossessions could return to levels last seen 15 years ago, according to the Council of Mortgage Lenders. It's predicting a 50% rise next year. The Council, which represents banks and building societies, says it doesn't expect house prices to fall, but expects growth of just 1%. Our economics editor, Evan Davis, has more details.
Something's happening in the property market. Stories are emerging of people losing money, not making it from property. Flats are at the heart of it. So many of them.
Well, I mean, we've had 1 or 2 examples where flats perhaps valued 2 years ago, maybe being on the market, maybe at 220,000. Those flats, some of them are selling in the auction rooms between 160 and 170,000.
Flats have enjoyed spectacular gains over the last decade, but some buy-to-let investors now find the rental income doesn't cover the mortgage outgoings. They've had to sell or been repossessed. Well, if flats are on the front line, what about the housing market more generally? So far, the evidence of a slowdown is mixed and it's tentative. There's no killer statistic out there that says there's about to be a crash. The best we can do is piece together the evidence available. First, there's the evidence on house prices. Just today, a survey from HomeTrack. It's just one of several that come out, but it found house prices fell last month, just by 0.1%. Monthly figures are volatile, but housing market professionals have always known the boom had to end.
We see it pretty much flat from about now on through to the end of 2008. There'll be some regional differences there, and of course, if you adjust for general prices, that means that they're falling in real terms.
The next piece of evidence today, new mortgages. The number of mortgages lenders approved for borrowers fell 6% last month. A possible indicator that fewer buyers are out there. The figure was at its lowest for 2 years. The final nugget of news today was on repossessions. A forecast from the Council of Mortgage Lenders for next year that they'll rise 50%, and they've no reason to overstate it.
Well, I think with interest rates that have already gone up, with the stress that that will create for some households who already face council tax increases and other increases in utility costs, we're anticipating that the shock will be a significant one for some people.
If there are signs of a housing slowdown, one factor might limit the damage. The broad economy beyond housing continues to motor, so far at least. That's the thing to watch most closely next year. Evan Davis, BBC News.
Coming up on tonight's programme. He's off, while Lewis Hamilton, Britain's latest sporting sensation, is moving abroad.
I'm moving. I've decided to move to Switzerland, and it's been a really tough year in terms of, I've not been able to spend a lot of time with my friends, my family.
Two men accused of trying to blackmail a member of the royal family were named today. Ian Strachan and Sean McGuigan are due to appear at the Old Bailey next month. It's alleged they demanded £50,000 for withholding an explicit videotape said to feature a minor member of the royal family. Nick Heim is here with more details.
Hugh, this alleged royal blackmail plot involves the kind of rather sleazy allegations which often circulate in Fleet Street but rarely get published because they're almost impossible to stand up. One of the two men arrested is Ian Strachan, aged 30. He was born Paul Adelsteinsson, his father was Icelandic, and he was brought up in Aberdeen. He's described as a property developer, now living in London. He's being held in Belmarsh Prison. The other's been named as Sean McGuigan, aged 40, who lives in this South London street. He's now said to be in Wandsworth Jail. At a meeting here at the Park Lane Hilton, the two allegedly tried to sell a videotape to an undercover policeman. The tape supposedly showed a royal aide snorting cocaine and making allegations about several members of the royal family. Ian Strachan's lawyer is this man, Giovanni Di Stefano, whose previous high-profile clients have included Slobodan Milosevic and several members of Saddam Hussein's regime. Earlier today, Mr. Di Stefano told me his client had been working with a Sunday newspaper to expose the royal aide.
This was an exercise in my client highlighting to a member of the royal family that a person close to that member of the royal family is not an appropriate person to have around. That's what it's about. It's not about money or about blackmail.
But Ian Strachan, described by his lawyer as something of a champagne Charlie, had approached other newspapers as well. And we've learnt he also took other, so far unpublished claims about the royal to the country's most famous PR consultant.
The allegations the person was making concerned a royal, and some of these allegations have been referred to in newspapers, although not all of the allegations that the person came to see us about.
Now, a court order bans the media from identifying the alleged blackmail victim, the witnesses, or any companies connected with this case. But a court hearing last month was also held in private and has alarmed some lawyers.
This is a serious criminal charge, but a normal criminal charge of blackmail. And only in very exceptional circumstances is the principle that justice should be open and transparent got rid of. In this case, the doors were closed, and we don't know why.
Whatever the reason, it seems quite possible, given that court order, but newspapers and broadcasters will never be able to report it. You.
Thank you very much. The Environment Secretary Hilary Benn says the government might have to introduce much tougher targets for reducing carbon emissions than previously thought. The current climate change bill going through Parliament calls for a 60% cut in emissions by 2050, but Mr Benn said that could be revised. Climate change bill also gives councils the power to pilot schemes to charge households depending on how much rubbish they throw away. The government says guidance about the scale of the pilots will be issued at a later stage, and the Conservatives say it's not a green tax and will mean people will end up paying more. A group of French charity workers in Chad may be charged with abducting children and fraud after attempting to fly more than 100 children out of the country. French President Nicolas Sarkozy has called the workers' behaviour illegal and unacceptable, but their lawyer claims that they are being exploited for political gain. Our correspondent Alan Little has the story.
They are in the eye of a storm they do not understand. Distress and confusion are written on their faces. They thought they were on their way to new homes in France, persuaded by the French charity Ul-Haq to leave their own homes and families behind.
They said they would enroll us in school. They spoke with our father and he allowed us to go with them. They said we would be trained and that when we were older they would give us a car. They came 4 times to take children from our village. Many children went with them.
Then, as they were about to board the plane, the President of Chad launched an astonishing barrage of accusations. The children, he said, were being trafficked. They would be sold off to paedophiles. They would be killed for their organs.
It's unacceptable in the 21st century. The entire world needs to witness this. We are going to take all the necessary steps to shed light on the kidnapping of the children from Chad and Sudan.
And so 9 French nationals, 3 journalists as well as charity workers, their Belgian pilot and 7 Spanish flight crew find themselves under arrest and threatened with years in a Chadian jail. They're the focus of popular outrage in Chad, an outrage consciously stoked by the country's president and which will carry all the baggage of France's colonial past in this part of Africa.
What is being said in Chad is exaggerated, overstated. Why? Because we are in a very delicate political context. The peace force is about to deploy, and we know that the Chad government doesn't want this, and that it wants to control the zone.
French troops are due to lead an EU peacekeeping force into the region next month. Paris knows that that mission cannot succeed without Chad's support. Today, the French government said it agreed with Chad that the aid workers were acting illegally. Whatever they intended, whatever they believed they were doing, the consequences in this political context, at this political moment, have been disastrous, and their own country has turned its back on them. Alan Little, BBC News.
18 paintings worth as much as £100 million have been bequeathed to the Tate and the National Gallery by Simon Sainsbury, great-grandson of the man who founded Sainsbury's supermarket. Paintings include Water Lilies, Setting Sun by Claude Monet, an early work by Lucien Freud called Boy Smoking, and 2 paintings by Pierre Bonnard, making the Tate's collection of this painter's work the best outside Paris. The British motor racing star Lewis Hamilton has decided to move to Switzerland to escape the kind of media attention he's received over the past year. In his first season in Formula One, Hamilton missed winning the world title by a single point. He told our correspondent Adam Parsons that all the attention meant he could no longer lead a normal life in Britain.
Hello.
Cinema Welcome Committee.
Good morning.
How are you?
This was Lewis Hamilton's first public appearance since returning from the final Grand Prix of the season, a cheerful visit to Great Ormond Street Hospital. He looks remarkably comfortable in the spotlight, yet when we spoke, he also seemed a little bemused by the speed and extent of his fame.
All I can remember is just in the past, if I ever saw someone that you've seen on TV or something, your face lights up. If someone you admire or you particularly like. I never actually thought that I would have that effect on anyone when I got older, and it's quite an unusual experience.
So too was this, the relentless attention given to Hamilton, and the pressures of his fame have now led him to take a radical step. You spoke a little early in the season about the problems with being followed by photographers, the tabloid fascination with your private life, and hinted then you might move out of England. What's your thought at the moment about that?
I'm moving. I've decided to move to Switzerland, and it's been a really tough year in terms of, I've not been able to spend a lot of time with my friends, my family. It's not like a normal job, you're traveling all the time, you live out your suitcase, and it's really, really tough to manage that all. But I've decided to move to Switzerland, and I think it's over there. I've been very fortunate. People don't come up to you, so they leave you, they give you a space, and I've got a nice little place over there, so I'll relocate there.
And what of his apparently fractious relationship with his teammate Fernando Alonso?
I'm not going to say we sit down and we're best friends, and he calls me up and wants to come to my house. But we get on really well. We turn up, we say hi, we play PlayStation, we do whatever. We sometimes have dinner. I don't know who's going to be my teammate next year. I'm not really particularly bothered. If it's Fernando, then great. We'll fight for another year, which is even more challenging for me, obviously.
Today was a day for smiles and reflection, but at his heart, Hamilton is a prodigious and very serious sports star. Adam Parsons, BBC News.
10 o'clock news hour continues on BBC News 24 and on BBC One. I'll be back with the headlines after you've joined our news teams where you are. Bye for now.
Good evening, I'm Ian White with the Look North News. If you thought football hooliganism was a thing of the past, then think again. Tonight we've exclusive pictures of the violence that flared up outside Elland Road on Saturday when Leeds played Millwall. Our reporter Jenny Hill and cameraman Malik Walton had access to the police operation.
And they thought this was a thing of the past. Saturday's violent scenes reminiscent of the football hooliganism of the 80s. But this is 2007, and even specially trained officers told us they'd never seen anything like it.
This is quite unique. We don't often see this kind of violence. As you can see, a lot of the people involved from the away support are older, so these are not young people, these are grown men, and you can see just how vicious they've been today.
These were the scenes before the game had even started. Police had separated rival fans and escorted busloads of Millwall supporters, but neither they nor the presence of children could stop violence breaking out. After a Leeds victory, hundreds of fans clashed with police. Officers held Millwall supporters inside the ground while they dispersed home fans.
You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. I mean, there'll be people who will complain if we'd allowed these hooligan element to stay and wait for the Millwall supporters who are still waiting to come out of the ground. There'll be people who complain about that. Also, there'll be people who complain about us moving them away, which we need to do because they will be seriously disordered if we don't.
12 people were arrested. This lunchtime, Leeds United told the BBC they'll work with police to identify those involved. Jenny Hill, BBC Look North.
And a few hours ago, Leeds Chief Executive Sean Harvey had this to say about what happened.
Well, you've got to actually sometimes question the motives of some of the people who were involved in the trouble. I mean, I'm not convinced yet that all the people that were involved in the trouble after the game had actually been inside the stadium to watch it. In fact, I'm sure when an analysis is done in the cold light of day, I think we'll find that a significant number of those involved probably didn't even come to the game. So that's society's problem that just attaches itself to football. But, this is a wonderful game. It was enjoyed by 30,000 people here in the main on Saturday. And yes, it's important and it's a very serious matter, but it doesn't need getting out of perspective.
The West Yorkshire secondary school, once branded the worst in Britain, is to close. The riding school in Halifax was put back into special measures earlier this year. Pupils will begin to be transferred to other schools, meaning the Ridings will close its doors in the summer of 2009. The National Union of Teachers described the move as thoughtless and short-sighted. Police investigating the death of a Polish teenager in Leeds have released CCTV footage of the girl minutes before she died. Lydia Molitska was filmed on the number 3 bus at Dewsbury Road just before 6:30 on Tuesday night. Police are now piecing together the 19-year-old's last movements before she was found dead in a passageway between Dolly Street and Lincoln Road. A Keighley farmer has been cleared of animal cruelty after he shot 2 Dalmatians that were chasing pregnant sheep on his land. Part of the shooting was witnessed by a 12-year-old boy looking after the dogs at the time. Terence Blackburn told the court 7 sheep had died following the incident and he had no choice but to shoot the dogs to prevent them causing further damage. He left court without commenting, but the dog's owner, Doreen Hardacre, condemned the verdict.
I'm just absolutely gutted. You know, my dogs and my kids didn't do anything wrong that day, and it just gives Terence Blackburn a licence to kill.
From capitalist to conservationist, one of Yorkshire's richest businessmen says he now wishes he hadn't built Meadowhall. Paul Sykes says he'd no idea how the shopping culture would take over. He's been talking to Ben Cryer.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Paul Sykes.
Collecting a lifetime award for his contribution to Yorkshire. But speaking at his home near Ripon, Paul Sykes had a different take on his achievements. At 64 years old, the hard-working, straight-talking Barnsley businessman is probably best known for this, Meadowhall. But now looking back, Paul has a different view on his involvement of one of the largest indoor shopping centres in Europe.
Do you wish, as a kind of environmentalist now, do you think, well, maybe I shouldn't have done that, maybe there was the wrong thing to do?
Yeah, you do. I mean, I'm certainly, I can't be compatible with consumerism at present. I'm thinking it's gone way beyond what I expected. I didn't think people were going to become obsessed with it. I saw that then, just as it's a challenge to see whether we can actually move this derelict land into use. But looking back, yeah, I mean, I'd rather be something else than shopping, yeah.
His comments are all the more astonishing, as at the time he embodied the money-making ethos of Thatcher's Britain.
I think first and foremost, one must say, in the pursuit of profit.
And money he made. He became one of the richest men in the country by developing the old steelworks. These days he's more concerned about the environment. Over the last few years, he's planted around 500,000 trees on his land near Ripon.
To be able to watch trees grow year after year, watch the leaves fall and then restart in the spring, it's a fantastic thing. I think this is the best creation I've done, actually. And anything, the best by far.
From capitalist to conservationist, Paul Sykes has a lifetime of achievements to reflect upon.
Well, now look at the weather prospects from Paul Hudson.
Thanks so much, Ian. Good evening, everyone. Just a few showers to come, mainly across the Pennines. Elsewhere, it should be dry with clear spells, and we'll see lows down to 4 or 5 degrees. Another bright day with some sunshine. Again, there will be 1 or 2 showers across the Pennines, and I think the best of the sunshine will be during the morning, because through the afternoon it tends to cloud up, but it still stays bright. Still some sunny intervals to be had, especially for eastern parts of our region, with temperatures around about 13 degrees. That's the forecast.
Well, don't forget, of course, Claire Frisbee here in the morning from 6:25, and we're back with Look North at 6:30 tomorrow night. A very good night. Bye-bye.
Tonight's main news: the government has admitted that there are 300,000 more foreign workers in Britain than previously thought. They now account for up to 8% of the workforce. And the Saudi king has started a controversial state visit to Britain after accusing the government of ignoring warnings about terror attacks. Newsnight is starting on BBC Two, but from all of us here on the 10 o'clock team, have a good night.
Dial